Hello and welcome to my speed build. Today I'm building on the Prospector's Paradise lot in the new world of Gibby Point from the Adventure Awaits expansion pack. The inspiration for this build actually came from the fabric pattern on the dining room chairs. It reminded me so much of a 90s family home that I decided to build a whole house around it. From there, the story came together. I imagine this as a grandparent's home that's been in the family for generations. The kind of cozy house where kids grow up, move out, and then come back years later with children of their own. It's a blend of farmhouse and cabin styles with 4 bedrooms and 3 bathrooms. I wanted it to feel timeless, a house that's been standing for generations. The stone walls and wood siding give it that sturdy cabin meets farmhouse look, while the covered porch and simple landscaping make it welcoming without feeling too polished. It's the kind of house that fits any decade, especially one that's been loved by the same family for years. It's warm, a little outdated, but full of history and love. I wanted it to feel like the perfect home for a legacy or generation style playthrough. Somewhere you could see your Sims family stories play out over decades. In my head, this is the kind of house where Grandma is always baking chocolate chip cookies and Grandpa insists on fixing everything himself. They raised their kids here, and now they've turned it into a place where the extended family can come visit for holidays or long weekends. I imagined that at some point in the 90s, they decided to renovate the downstairs to make it more comfortable for hosting. Maybe they had their first grandchild, or maybe they just wanted the house to feel fresh again. And throughout the years, they kept it very much in the style of that time. You can see that reflected in the furniture, the colors, and the little design quirks that only the 90s could pull off. As a side note, the upstairs, on the other hand, never got touched. That's where the decades really start to layer. You can see traces of the 70s and 80s still there. The old wooden paneling on the walls, blue carpet that was fashionable once upon a time, and furniture that's solid but long out of style. We'll get to that part later. I loved the idea that this house shows its history through the rooms. Structurally, I kept the exterior old-fashioned to make it feel like a family home that's been around for a long time. Maybe 80 or even 100 years. I used a lot of exposed stone and wood on the interiors to give it that generational charm, like it's been passed down through several lifetimes. I also added a screened-in patio, which just felt essential. That was such a popular feature in the 90s, especially for family homes in warmer areas. It gives you that breezy, summer evening feeling where you can picture Grandma reading a magazine while Grandpa grills outside. It's a place where your Sims can grow houseplants, paint on an easel, or relax after dinner. Now, moving on to the nostalgic part, the 90s renovation. The kitchen sets the tone for the whole downstairs. I went with a country blue palette, soft, a little dated, but cozy. The floor is that kind of light mixed tone tile that was so common in the 90s, and I added older appliances to keep that nostalgic touch. There's an older microwave, a chunky coffee maker, and a slightly mismatched stove that looks like it's been faithfully used for decades. I added woven rugs for a handmade look and added lots of items to the walls. Painted wood, pots and pans, aprons, and even those classic basket collages that were almost mandatory in 90s homes. I remember seeing those in so many kitchens growing up. The color story downstairs stays in that dusty pastel range, lots of muted pinks and blues. And then there's the dining room, the heart of this entire build. The nostalgic pattern on the dining chairs was what started it all. Something about it instantly transported me back to the 90s, when everything was warm-toned and a little cluttered in a comforting way. That dining set became the emotional anchor of this build. I built the entire downstairs around the idea that this was the room where the family gathers for birthdays, holidays, and long meals that shift into family game night. The furniture throughout the downstairs is a mix of oak and pine with light varnish, and the patterns are subtle but cheerful. Plaid, florals, and southwestern style. The southwestern style was huge in the early to mid 90s. You'll see touches of that throughout the house. Geometric rugs, wall hangings, and even some terracotta planters. In the entryway, I added dried flowers, another big 90s trend. They were everywhere back then, often in rose or peach tones. If you want to recreate a 90s look, dried flowers and pastel Southwest decor are your best friends. This living room feels like stepping straight into the 90s. Cozy, a little cluttered, and full of personality. The stone walls and wood paneling give it that sturdy, lived-in look, while the pale blue sofa and matching skirted armchair were everywhere back then. The southwestern rug ties the colors together in those dusty pastels that define the decade. Nothing feels too coordinated, but everything feels familiar. The older TV on a stand, the rotary phone, the basket of yarn, and even the shelf full of puzzles. It's all those little details that make it feel like Grandma's house in the best possible way. It's the kind of house that's always just a little too warm, with something baking in the oven and the TV playing quietly in the background. Throughout the build, I added lots of phones. One here in the living room, one in on the kitchen wall, and one in the home office, which I'll show you later. In the 90s, you always had at least two landlines in the house. Phones were usually on a special little side table with a phone book and a notepad for messages. I love including details like that because it instantly makes the space feel more real. There's also a guest bathroom off the living room that feels perfectly balanced between antique charm and 90s nostalgia. The stone and wood accents give it that old-fashioned country feel, while the beige tiles and neutral tones make it unmistakably 90s. I later add sunflowers in the corner, which are the perfect finishing touch. Bright, cheerful, and very much of the era. It's like the kind of bathroom that hasn't changed in decades, mostly because Grandma still loves the charm of the country decor. I added a few gameplay items to the living room to make it feel even more like Grandma's space. Things like a knitting bag and an embroidery box. Those little touches really bring the room to life, and they fit perfectly with the cozy, crafty personality I imagined for her. It's easy to picture her spending the afternoon here, rocking in her chair while working on a blanket or a new embroidery piece, while the TV hums softly in the background. It adds warmth and realism, like this house truly belongs to someone who's always making something by hand. And we're back to the patio. I use the sofas in the same swatch as the dining chairs that originally sparked the idea for the build. The screened-in patio keeps the same rustic feel as the rest of the house, and the wooden furniture is a little scuffed, like it's been sitting here for years, and the cushions have that unmistakable southwestern pattern. There's also an easel for your Sims to paint on, and plenty of space for after-dinner conversations. It's functional, a little dated, and it looks like it's been part of the house for decades. Right off the screened patio, there's a small deck with a picnic table and a compact grill. It's simple but practical, the kind of spot that your Sims will use constantly during family visits. It feels like a true backyard classic, a no-frills grilling area where Grandpa flips burgers while everyone else hangs out by the pool. And now we're on to the backyard. I wanted it to feel like a true family space. One side has a large play area with swings, treehouse slide, and sandbox that your Sims can actually play in. And the other side has an extra large pool with a water slide and a diving board. Those two items came with the Adventure Awaits pack. The pool has bright blue tiles to give it a classic look that fits perfectly with the 90s family home theme, and I surrounded it with the new flooring that came with Adventure Awaits, a beautiful wooden deck texture in some really nice swatches. I also added a few white lounge chairs and a picnic table with an umbrella to give the family plenty of space to sit by the pool. I used wooden fencing to tie everything together visually, giving it a clean, structured look that still feels natural against the stone of the house. And it adds some realism to the build, that a large pool like this one would be fenced off for children's safety. For the kids area, I added flowery green landscaping for a playful look and built a sandbox using the terrain paint sand. And remember, if you fill the area of a sandbox completely with that sand, it actually works as a functional sandbox. I love little gameplay touches like that. Though, fair warning, I added toys to the sandbox in this build, and sometimes the adult Sims in the game will clean up the toys and they just disappear. I still haven't figured out where they went. I also added a few planters opposite the playground equipment so the grandparents can keep a small garden going while the kids play. Maybe herbs or small vegetables or a few flowers that don't require much fuss. When I built this backyard, I was going with the idea that the grandparents might have invested most of their renovation budget back here, turning it into a family retreat. The goal was to make it feel like the kind of backyard where every generation finds something fun to do. The grandparents might grill, the parents might be lounging, and the kids wear themselves out on the swings before dinner. It's a mix of gameplay and realism. Nothing flashy, just a believable, playable family yard that feels like it's seen a lot of summers. Moving upstairs, we first have the grandparents' bedroom, which really shows the late 70s and early 80s aesthetic. The wood-paneled walls contrasting with the light wood of the furniture, and the blue carpet with braided throw rug immediately set the tone. Nostalgic, cozy, and completely untouched by modern trends. The furniture is sturdy and simple, the kind that lasts forever, and the layered plaid curtains add that unmistakable vintage flair. I used matching blue lamps and a quilted bedspread in those classic tones that were everywhere back then. The framed photos and the old wall art make it feel personal, like a room that's been in the same for decades, because honestly, they never saw a reason to change it. And this guest room hasn't been updated in decades either. Maybe it was stylish back in the 70s, but now it's more nostalgic than anything. The ruffled plaid curtains have faded, and it's clear the room has seen better days. The yellow lamps and braided rug add to the retro mix of colors that somehow still feels comforting, like you can sense all the memories that have passed through here. This corner room is the home office. I used the new rug from Adventure Awaits pack and tucked it under the very 90s desk, oversized to fit a huge 90s computer. The computer I chose technically is not a 90s monitor, but the vibe is right. Big, clunky, and definitely not portable. I pictured this as mostly grandma's space, with piles of mail and a little password notebook, because grandparents always seem to have one, filled with scribbled notes and various account logins. I also put in an attic decorations box. I love adding those for family homes. It's an easy way to decorate for holidays, and it makes the space feel lived in. Around it, I added more clutter to make the room feel truly lived in. Plastic bins, storage crates, and a few stacks of random papers that probably haven't been touched in years. It's a messy in a believable way, like a room that slowly turned into the family's catch-all for seasonal stuff and old memories. And of course, I added another rotary phone on a side table in the home office. These phones are just for decoration, but I really wish they had gameplay. It would add something special if older Sims used a landline instead of a cell phone. I would also love it if you could disable cell phones for certain households, especially if the household is from the past before cell phones were a thing. That would fit perfectly with legacy style playthroughs, especially if you're trying to make the house feel authentically old-fashioned. The other bedrooms are for the grandkids. I imagine they used to be the grandparents' kids' rooms, but once the grandchildren started visiting, they added bunk beds so everyone could stay overnight. Now there's room for all the cousins to pile in while the parents take the guest room down the hall. These two bedrooms are still full of old toys, hand-me-down decor, and even an old 80s gaming system that somehow still works. The walls are covered with children's artwork and craft projects that make the space feel warm and personal. This upstairs bathroom is mainly for the kids to use, and it still has that unmistakable vintage feel. The tile counters and beige fixtures feel straight out of the late 80s, and the small radiator under the window adds to the older charm. The fuzzy brown rugs on the floor are a classic touch, the kind you'd find in almost every family home back then. I like that it feels realistic, like something out of an old family home, a little dated, but in the best, most nostalgic way. And this primary bathroom carries that same cozy, lived-in feeling, but with more space. The colors are still soft and neutral, with that warm wood and creamy tile combo that was everywhere in the 80s. The muted green rugs and dusty blue towels add that soft, familiar color palette that somehow feels instantly comforting. I even added bath salts and bath beads to the countertop because those were everywhere in that decade. No bathroom shelf was complete without them. I used one of my favorite rugs from the Adventure Awaits pack in here as well. That has the handmade look that fits the cozy, slightly dated vibe perfectly. This bathroom is tidy, practical, and even a little sentimental, the kind of space that's been gently updated over time, but never really changed. Simple, comfortable, and quietly familiar, like a snapshot of another decade that still fits perfectly in this house. And after adding a few more decor pieces to the bedrooms, it was time for the landscaping. I wanted the outside to feel natural and a little wild, like the kind of country home that's blended into its surroundings over time, with plants that look like they've always belonged there. I decided to keep the landscaping soft and layered, hostas, white lavender, and a mix of debug plants tucked into a stone-bordered garden in the front yard. Usually, when I'm making a front garden, I put taller plants in the back, then trim the front border of the garden with low-lying bushes, and Horse Ranch Debug has the best ones. And then I put medium height plants in the middle. If I have a lot of one type of plant, I will rotate them slightly in different directions to create a more natural pattern. And in the backyard, I added a few planters for the grandparents to plant some vegetables and herbs. I even added a few seed packets beside the planters to get your Sims started. In the back, there's a small fenced-in area for the trash and recycling, with a gate you can lock to keep things neat and critter-free. As for the trees, I wanted them to blend in naturally with the world around this lot, nothing that would stand out too much. I mostly pulled the trees from Debug, since those seem to match this environment the best. I used Life and Death Debug as well as Horse Ranch. I chose warm autumn tones, soft oranges and golds for the trees, so that the house has a cozy fall vibe. It's the kind of yard that looks like it changes gently with the seasons, where even the fallen leaves seem to belong. After placing the larger trees, I added shrubs around the foundation, using both the short and tall versions to add texture and height. I moved them around and rotated them for a natural look. Then I added a few trellises along the walls, with bright flowers climbing up them for a subtle pop of color. For the finishing touches, I painted in patches of dirt under the shrubs and trees. This is simple landscaping, but it makes sense for this home and makes the whole yard feel more lived in, like it's really part of the world instead of sitting on top of it. And I also added the butterflies that came in the Adventure Awaits pack to the front garden. There's a few different varieties to choose from, and they really add something special. And I also placed lightning bugs scattered throughout the yard as well. By the time it was done, the whole build had that quiet, nostalgic charm I was hoping for. Comfortable, familiar, and just a little bit imperfect in the best way. And there we have it, Grandma's nostalgic 90s house. A 4-bedroom, 3-bathroom family home that's seen decades of love, laughter, and all the unmistakable decor that defined the 90s. The house is warm, familiar, and is exactly the kind of place where your Sims could live for generations. And who knows, maybe the next heir in your save will finally decide it's time for a full renovation, updating everything to bring the house into a more modern style. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this cozy little trip back to the 90s. This build is available on the gallery if you'd like to save it. And as always, I'll see you in the next one.